Welcome to the Backstage Creative. My name is Krista Copper. On this podcast, I interview the highly creative and passionate people who work behind the scenes of theater. I am a musician, I play the bass, and I have been involved in theater for about 10 years now. And I have really enjoyed getting to see multiple productions come to life. I love the process of watching things come together, and I love seeing all of these different pieces come together to create one whole, to create one production. It's my hope that these interviews will serve as inspiration for you in whatever way you're involved with theater, whether you're a professional, whether you're amateur, or whether you just enjoy going to see shows. I hope that these conversations with designers and stage managers and musicians and sound engineers can help you appreciate theater in a deeper way. Normally on this show, I don't get into specific productions with people. There are several other podcasts out there that deal with specific shows, mostly shows on Broadway or off Broadway. And I don't know, I tend to like to talk more about more evergreen topics like stress management and networking and design processes and how to handle conflict successfully. I like to try to talk about topics that everyone can relate to in whatever avenue of the arts you're involved in and whatever part of the world you're living in. However, today is an exception. If you're like me, you've been watching Hamilton often. I can't think of a better time for a musical of that caliber to be on Disney Plus and to be so accessible. I know that for me, these past 4 or 5 months during the coronavirus pandemic have been really difficult. It's hard to feel disconnected from your community, right? It's hard to not be involved with the show right now, and it's hard to not have a show on my calendar. And yeah, I've been feeling really disconnected because of this, which I think is natural, and I think probably a lot of us are feeling that. So being able to watch Hamilton has really given me hope. It's helped me relive past days and remember why I love theater, and it's also given me hope that our industry will be back. We'll be working again. We'll be doing live productions. We'll be creating magic. We'll be serving our audiences. We'll be creating and designing and creating art together. So, speaking of Hamilton, today is my conversation with Richard Hammond, who is the bass player for Hamilton. Like I said, I don't typically like to spend a lot of time talking about one particular show, but this episode is an exception. I think Hamilton is almost in a category of its own now, just in terms of accessibility and how much it's worked itself into our culture and people who maybe necessarily aren't into theater or aren't huge supporters of the arts have at least heard of Hamilton. As a bassist, I've wanted to sit down and talk with Richard Hammond for a while, and so I'm so glad that it worked out now. I really hope that you'll enjoy this conversation. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I hope that you'll have fun listening to it. So here we go. Here's my conversation with Richard Hammond. What have you been doing these past 4 months? How have you been playing bass? Have you just been hanging out? How have you spent your time during lockdown?
It's actually been really interesting. Yeah, lots and lots of music. The first like 6 weeks to 2 months, it was bizarre. It was kind of like everything just moved online, and I was doing a ton of remote session work. A bunch of different stuff was coming in from all sorts of weird parts of my musical universe, and it was a lot of fun. It was really busy, and then as per the home studio thing, everything just kind of fell off a cliff, and the work just dried up. It was like a faucet switched off. What was interesting though was I spoke to a couple of other friends who also were doing a ton of home studio stuff, and their work also dried up almost on the same day, literally around Memorial Day. And it's sort of then there was nothing for 3 or 4 weeks, and I kind of took some time off, which was nice. I haven't had time away from the bass in New York City since I've been here. It was actually really nice. You know, fingers are super soft now. You're a bass player, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. So, you know, the in the last week, things have started to trickle back in, and trying to get my act back together, and do some playing and get strong again. It's been fun. It's been nice.
Yeah, I bet it seems like the recording industry, people putting together albums. I love that that can still happen. That can still keep going even when like live performances and orchestra concerts and shows like that all that stopped, but at least there's something. Some
There's
people are
something.
still doing something.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Look, I never know what the math is on this stuff. I never take it for granted. When it's there, it's there. I'm super thankful for it, and it can all go away tomorrow. It's just I do it when it's there, and I enjoy the process.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely thought a lot about during this time of being grateful for things like when I can get together with a group of friends and we can just sight read things, or just being grateful for when you can play and just accepting when you can't and when it's not possible to do a live performance.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a massive part of my outlook as well. Trying to trying to be grateful. Grateful for
Hmm.
what we have, because even if there's not any music going on, there's still, for me anyway, it's just like there was still a gazillion things to be doing, experiencing, and enjoying. At New York, it's a strange time. Obviously there's a lot going on, but um, I've been trying to make the most of the fact that it feels slower than usual. It feels actually relaxed in New York for the first time in my experience. It's kind of like Labor Day or Memorial Weekend, but like a larger version of it. Everybody leaves New York and it's quiet for a couple of days, and it's nice. I've enjoyed just having a slower pace of life in general. It's been fun.
So, could you take us through your background, where you're from, any school you went to, how you got into bass and theater, and just kind of just a general overview of how you got to playing on Hamilton?
Sure, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of it. I grew up. I'm a Kiwi. I'm a New Zealander. I grew up in a very small town in the middle of nowhere, the west coast of the North Island, called Dargaville. It's basically a tiny little rural farming depot town, and very very little going on there. But it's a great town. And at that time, the high school had a really bizarrely outsized music program, and there were two teachers there, Ray Palmer and Trevor Benz, and they basically there were four concert bands and four jazz bands that were sort of running at that particular point. A lot of kids were involved in the music department, and I got in there when I was still at intermediate school. Anyway, I was about 11. I started playing the bass, and as soon as I could read a note, they threw me in a band playing with other kids, and I really got into it. After a couple of years, I realized that this is what I wanted to do with my life, and I also kind of bizarrely enough knew at a fairly early age that I wanted to be in New York. I worked towards, I had to figure out how to get there, and what that meant was trying to study in the United States. It was the best way to get a visa, and also, it was going to be a great opportunity to learn, and so on and so forth. And so I applied to Berkeley. Fortunately, I got a good scholarship, and I'd been out playing as a professional musician for already 3 years or so out of high school, and I managed to save quite a bit of money just doing that. And so I went to Boston when I was around about 22. I knew I only had X amount of bread to get through. There was only one degree that I could actually finish, and that was a performance degree, given the amount of money that I had and the amount of time that was allotted. So I pretty much kind of blazed through the degree in 5 semesters. I did like a huge amount of like there was large course loads every semester, and I tested out of a whole bunch of stuff. I really, I worked hard at it. I finished the 5 semesters with 10 credits thereabouts left. I went back to New Zealand, saved some money, a bunch of playing, came back to Boston and went part time for the next year and a half, just doing kind of zero point 0.5 of a credit per semester, and just hanging out in Boston and trying to make money to get down to New York. I auditioned for Manhattan School of Music, and again, fortunately, I got a good scholarship, and I went down there Started there in '96, and that was how I got to New York. I was there for 2 years at the Manhattan School of Music, doing the graduate program. And once that was done, I was basically out in New York trying to make a living. By around about 2000, I got my first touring gig with Angelique Kidjo. Actually, it would have been '99, and that was amazing. I was with Angelique for a year and a half, and then from there, it just kind of, I did different touring gigs. I was doing a lot of local gigs. I was doing session work. It was a lot of fun. And then what happened was Spider-Man, the U2 musical came up, and a bunch of friends of mine were involved in that, and they sort of pulled me into audition. I ended up getting the gig, and that was basically how I started out on Broadway. We did that show for 3 years. There was, as you probably know, there was a whole lot of drama surrounding, just even getting started on that show. It was almost 2 years from when we did our first workshop at SIR with the U2 guys and David Campbell. It was almost 2 years from that point before the first preview happened. But yeah, that was a really fun experience. It was great, a lot of fun. And when that finished, I basically went back into the touring world. I toured with Nena, the German artist, the 99 Luftballons singer. I basically subbed for the bass player for almost a year, and that was really fun as well. At the end of that, I got a call from Michael Keller asking if I would be interested in doing Hamilton. I spoke to a couple of folks that kind of knew the scene, and they were like, "Dude, if there was ever a show that you wanted to be involved in, this is the one." And of course, as soon as I heard the music, it was game over. It was just like, of course, whatever I can do to be a part of this. It wasn't quite as short as I thought it would be, but that's sort of that's the history.
Sure. Oh goodness, so much I want to get into. Let's start first. So, I love to talk to people who have moved to like a just a different continent, a totally different part of the country. Was there any like cultural things that were either shocking or unexpected, from moving from New Zealand to either Boston or New York?
Oh yeah, everything. Oh, everything. I landed in LA way back in '91, and I have a couple of friends, great musicians, a guy called Matt Cattingib and an amazing drummer called Kevin Winard, and we'd done some playing in New Zealand, and they came and picked me up at the airport and basically took me straight to Vegas, and and it was, man, that was something. Talk about a culture shock. And then we came back to New York. I mean, sorry, to LA. We got to go out and see some shows. I got to see a band called Lost Lobotomies playing at the Baked Potato, and it was Steve Lukather and Greg Bissonette and all these guys that I just heard on records since I was a kid, and just blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. And then Boston was a whole other thing altogether. It was, the Northeast. It's completely and utterly different. At least LA, there are certain things that are like New Zealand, in terms of, it's a little more tropical and warmer. Yeah, Boston really took me a minute to get used to. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Firstly, when all the leaves came off the trees, I was like, what's happening here? What? It looks so barren. And then on top of that, I had basically, for me, 6 months of winter. It was colder than I'd ever been in my life by October, and that lasted until March, and I was just like,
Uh-huh.
this place is crazy. Yeah, it was pretty nuts. But then, yeah, obviously, like learning to speak so that people, especially from other countries, could understand a word that I was saying was also, that was a bit of a trip. At Berkeley, all my European buddies were just like, I know he said something, but you know, did you understand it? No, I didn't understand it. So yeah, there was a lot of little adjustments for sure.
Who did you study with at Berkeley?
My bass teacher was Whit Brown, who was amazing. Whit was incredible. Whit was, he's kind of the Ray Brown guy at
Mhm.
at Berkeley, and I loved it. You know, he was the real deal. I also studied with John Rapucci for a minute, and John was great as well. He was sort of more of a Paul Chambers guy, which frankly, PC was sort of my guy. Like that was the guy that I really gravitated towards. You know, when I was learning how to play jazz,
Hmm.
that was the sound that I dug. He was the way that he played quarter notes, the way that he swung. That was what I liked. So yeah, it was. I was lucky. It was no lack of good teachers there and good guys to hang out with and go and watch. It was a pretty amazing experience. You know, I was playing all the time.
Yeah, I'm from Kansas, and then I did my grad school on the East Coast, and I remember just kind of the culture shock, even being from the United States of the East Coast, because it's so fast paced. They talk a little different than Midwesterners, and so
Yeah,
I
yeah. Hmm.
remember I floundered for a little bit until I was like, oh, okay, this is cultural. It's not. I'm not making this up. There are some cultural things I need to kind of come to
Yeah,
terms with if I'm gonna hang here.
yeah. Absolutely. Where'd you study?
The Hart School.
Oh, cool. Oh, wow.
Hmm.
And was it classical? What were you were you mostly dealing with?
Mostly classical. Yeah, I studied with Robert Black, so he's like this big contemporary guy. So we did all these weird, just super weird, modern, banging on your instrument type type pieces. So it was a hoot. It was so much fun.
Wow, that's cool, man. That's really
Hmm.
cool. You know, I'm pretty much self-taught on both acoustic and electric, and
Hmm.
you know, like the Arco thing has been such a work in progress, and that's actually
Hmm.
been one of the really fun parts of this last whole time period. I've just been digging in on that whole world and trying to kind of get that more together. It's just such a it's really fun. It's been really fun. I hold folks like yourself in very high esteem because I know how hard it is to do that.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Is there much Arco playing in Hamilton?
Yeah, there's a chunk. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
We have an amazing string section. There are, let me see, probably at least 7 or 8. You'd think I'd actually know this stuff by now, but like there's at least 7 or 8, maybe a few more tunes where I'm part of the string section, and I'm just trying to provide them with notes that sound good and that are in tune, so they can base their harmony. I have a tuner that is plugged in all the time, and I'm constantly looking at it
Mm,
just to make sure that I'm where I need to be pitch wise.
I love that. I've watched Hamilton several times since it came out on Disney Plus, and I watched it last
Oh,
night, and I
cool.
was like, okay, I'm gonna listen to the pit. I'm interviewing Richard Hammond tomorrow. And like 10 minutes into the story, I was like totally not even paying attention to the pit anymore, which I
Oh
think is a
yeah, yeah,
testament, which is a
yeah. No.
testament to how great you sound.
Oh well, no. I mean, the same. I've only seen Hamilton. Sadly, and this is embarrassing. I should have seen Hamilton at this point in the Richard Rodgers, but I saw the last performance of Hamilton at the Public. Basically, Alex offered. He said, who would like to take the night off? About half of you can do it. Everybody the other half hold it down and we'll get subs in. And so several of us decided to take Alex up on that. I, I remember I was sitting next to Johnny Dinklage, who's our concert master, an incredible violinist. We were sitting next to each other, and we had the same experience. It's kind of like I'm gonna hear how the band sounds. I wonder how Aiden Moore was subbing for me that night, and he was actually the other bass player. There were two bass players on Spider Man. Aiden and I were the guys, and he's a dear friend and an amazing bass player. And he was subbing for me that night, and I was like, I'm gonna get to listen to Aiden play. But like literally within 5 minutes, I was so caught up in the show that I stopped. I mean, there's so much going on. It's such an incredible piece of art. The music sort of took a big back seat.
Hmm. Which is as it should be. Like I think that's theater when it's working the best. Is when everything is pulling you to one point. All of the costumes and the music and set. Nothing is
Yeah,
distracting from the story.
exactly. And on
Hmm.
top of that, we had been working for 3 months with this incredible cast. The sound was always good. Like we had a good setup. It wasn't anywhere near what we ended up with at the Rogers Theatre. That what we get to listen to down there is just unbelievable. It's like driving a Rolls Royce or something like that. But they had probably a half to 2/3 of that set up at the public theatre. So we were able to kind of catch most of what was going on, and we'd gotten to know the cast and so on and so forth. But actually seeing that whole thing in effect and seeing how stunning every single person was just it was an incredibly emotional experience.
Hmm.
Johnny and I were literally like sitting there with just like tears, running down our faces for a chunk of it, because it was really something. It was really really something.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I definitely cry every
Yeah.
time I've watched it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. It's definitely it's that show, man. Like
Hmm.
Lynn caught lightning in a bottle. Unbelievable.
So where did you come in with the Hamilton process? Like when did they? How far along was Hamilton when they brought you on?
I believe that they had done 2 workshops up to that point, but they were much they were stripped down. I believe that it was just one or two, Alex and maybe one or two other musicians. When I came in, that was the first use of a full band, the full 10 musicians, and that was at the beginning of 2015 down at the public theatre. That was basically when it all began for us, which was really basically previews. I was in New Zealand. There was some family stuff going on that I had to be in New Zealand for, and actually Aiden subbed for me for the first week of rehearsals, and I arrived just a couple of days before the first preview, which was a little nerve wracking. There was a lot to do and a lot to get up to speed with, but that was the basic timeline.
How did the bass book come to be?
Well, Alex Lackamore is such an amazing musician. He's really one of the single best musicians that I've been in the room with. He's seriously such a bad dude on every level. And the reason I say that is, amongst the many things that Alex does, is he's a really good bass player. He's a really good bass player, and he's a really good guitarist. And so the book was written. If you didn't play anything other than the notes that Alex wrote, not a single, didn't go off book in the slightest, it would be incredible. It was all done. Basically, the process was, our priorities, our whole thing was to nail the book as Alex had written it. And then once we had sort of done that, as the process unfolded down at the public theatre, all of us would very, very judiciously, and not all of us really, there are really a couple of instruments that are able to kind of step away and add their things. For instance, the
Hmm.
percussion book, there's no improvisation, very little improvisation, actually none really. Like whoever is doing that book, they're doing what is written and no more. But between the drums, the guitar book, and my book, as the show progressed, we would add little bits and pieces. And if Alex dug it, then it stayed. We took a compositional approach to it, in that if we were coming up with stuff, it was a specific thing and it repeated. Like it repeated every night in the same place. And so yeah, Alex trusted us to bring our musical personalities to the chairs that that we're all in. And yeah, it's very cool. It's always been a super challenging book. Always, it's still challenging. It's still super challenging to me. Yeah, I just have a blast playing it. It's so much fun. It's really fun, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I have such a ridiculously good group of bandmates down in the pit. Everybody there is so stellar. And rhythm section wise, you couldn't ask for much more. Robin Makatenge, our guitarist, is he's pretty much my favorite R&B guitarist in New York. He's sort of like one of the best kept secrets in a lot of ways. You know, he's such a he's but like all within the R&B community, he's a very well known and well regarded musician. You know, I was just telling somebody just a couple of minutes back before we started talking that I think like maybe a year ago there was a Luther Vandross tribute up at the Sugar Bar, and basically it was Luther's original band and Robin, and all of the great New York R&B singers all came out to pay tribute, and I think there's footage of it up on YouTube somewhere. But Robin just destroyed it, just so the real deal. And Andreas Ferrero, our drummer, is an absolute master, absolute master. He's played so much incredible music with so many incredible people in his musical past as well. Jazz world, Afro-Cuban world. Yeah, everybody is super committed. We all sort of show up with the same attitude, which I'm really psyched about. Everybody's really there to play. None of us wants to be the guy who's sort of letting the team down. That really helps to keep things feel fresh and on point. It's serious business. It's really fun, but it's serious business.
Yeah, especially for, I would imagine, a show that's as big and impactful as Hamilton. Do you ever feel the pressure? Like, millions of people have heard this musical either live or on Disney Plus. Do you feel pressure when you go into the pit to play that show?
Well, yeah, but not like any kind of. Well, I tell you, the first year that we did there was real pressure when the realization that basically the whole world was watching whenever you did anything. When we did the Prince tribute, everybody was watching. That felt like a lot of pressure. But now that we've been running for as long as we have been, the pressure is it sort of manifests in a different way. It's basically just what I described, which is the pressure to play your best for your bandmates, for the actors, for the people out in the audience. It's just like the pressure of playing a really great show. It's not something I take lightly anyway. I'm super grateful for what I have, and I want to make sure that I kind of do what I can do to honor that. Yeah, so it's not pressure like stress, but
Mm.
it's kind of like it's about to start, and this has got to be good, so
Hmm.
kind of like that.
Hmm. Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have much rest during that show?
No.
Yeah. I
Well,
didn't think so.
everybody, I mean, the bass is the most consistently working instrument throughout the entire show of Hamilton. Basically, at some point throughout the show, either in the first act or the second act, everybody gets the opportunity, with the exception of whoever's conducting. I think everybody gets at least enough time to maybe run to the bathroom if they needed to, but not the bass. The bass is playing throughout, and I dig that too. I like that. Honestly, it's
Hmm.
it's kind of like there's no time for me to look at the phone, check texts, or anything like that. The phone stays off for the entire show, and I like that. I would rather be fully in it and just make that my whole purpose, to be as in it as I can possibly be for those 3 hours. Not thinking about anything else, just trying to do what I'm there to do.
Hmm.
I think that helps the consistency, like the process of trying to be consistent and do your gig right.
Hmm. Is there anything you do to take care of yourself physically so that you can play, continuously for 3 hours? Like, that's hard.
Yeah, it's funny, I mean, I meditate every day. That's one of the things that I do, and I think that has a large bearing on at least being somewhat relaxed and less anxious in any kind of way, which manifests in less tension in the body. And
Hmm.
because whenever you get tension in the body and you're doing something as repetitive as that, you potentially going to run into trouble. And I have kind of learned over the course of time to incrementally get more and more tension away from me. I'm pretty relaxed when I do the show, and that knock on wood, I haven't suffered from anything in terms of tendonitis or anything like that up to this point. So and I hope that that continues to be the case. But yeah, I mean, just beyond that, it's just the usual things. Like for me, it's like eat right, exercise, meditate, get enough sleep. If I get those four things going concurrently, I'm usually okay. I'm usually okay to live, to be on the planet.
Hmm. I heard a quote from somewhere. I can't remember. Some bass player was saying how musicians are athletes of the small muscles. And I mean,
Yes,
bass players and percussionists, I think, are athletes of all the muscles. But
right,
um, when you're playing professionally, you do almost have to think of yourself as an athlete. Like, how are you taking care of yourself when you're not
absolutely,
playing?
yeah,
How's your posture when you are playing?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like playing. I mean, electric bass is actually a little easier, I think. Just because there's less going on. I find that playing acoustic bass, I'm still really working on that stuff. I'm still every time I practice, I'm having to pay attention as to where the tension is lying in my body, and like trying to kind of constantly create the habit of not kind of holding any tension so that I'm freer to actually play music. That's something that I've learned over the years. Like whenever I'm holding tension in my body, I'm not going to be playing as well as I could possibly be playing.
Yeah. And maybe it helps that let's see, you're doing upright, electric, and synthesizer in the show.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's some synth bass in there, which is really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, imagine me with just like my two fingers just going like that. Like I'm yeah, I'm not really playing it pianistically, shall we say?
Sure. So do you stand the whole time then?
No, no, it's all. I sit, and then the acoustic bass is on a stand. Basically, when I stand up to play it, I don't take it out of the stand. It just sort of sits. The end pin sits in the cup, and it just sort of swivels across, and then I put it back. The way, again, Alex wrote the book as such that there's no really crazy fast changes. It's all logistically possible, and once you get used to it, it's fairly comfortable.
That's one of my favorite parts of like tech week is when you get in the pit and you're like, okay, I have to get from upright to electric and I have one measure to do it. So
Yeah, yeah,
three measures before I'm going to turn the page. What two
yep,
measures before I'm going to,
yeah.
like you have to choreograph the whole thing. I love it. I think it's
That
fun.
whole thing, yeah, there was definitely a few of those moves in Spider-Man. Definitely a couple of really quick changes. But in Hamilton, it's all everything was worked out for us, man. It was we were very lucky in that regard.
Hmm. Do you have like a set practice routine that you do daily, weekly, anything like that?
I'm still an absolutely avid practicer. I love it. It's kind of about as much fun as I can have. I've always dug it. I always loved playing along with records, and that's how I learned to play. It's like I've always loved just kind of expanding my groove vocabulary, my like being able to speak different musical languages and learning about all of the commonalities between different styles of music. And yeah, I practice all the time. There's no real set thing that I do at home. What I have been doing a lot in the last couple of years is really it's sort of following on to the thing that we were talking about in terms of learning to kind of hold no tension in your body. Like I've been playing a lot without actually any other form of accompaniment, no metronome, no drum loops, no not playing along with any records, just me and the bass, focusing on doing that with full relaxation and centeredness. That's sort of been a goal. It's like trying to create habits, constantly trying to
Mm.
sort of lose. We're all trying to shed our bad habits and start good ones. If you're talking about Hamilton specifically, then yeah, I get up there. I try and get up there early. I usually try and get there an hour before the show, and that's just to kind of avoid any insanity that might happen with trains and transport and all that kind of stuff. it's actually turned into a fun musical thing for me too, because I'll spend half an hour just playing the bass and trying to sort of get my head in the game. You know what I mean? I'm definitely in the minority in terms of that whole thing. Most people don't do that, but I get something from it, so I do it.
So I was talking to someone about like showing up for a show, and they said that they always plan for like two major disasters,
Yeah,
so time wise, so that
exactly.
they can make sure that they get there.
Yeah, exactly. And I try, like the last thing I want to be is stressed before a performance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just like that's kind of what the whole thing is in service of. It's just get there early so you don't have to be stressed, so you can be relaxed and just sort of be in the environment that you're going to be in. I try and get to whatever gig I'm doing, be it Broadway, at least a half hour beforehand, just to kind of be in the room and just kind of have time to acclimate and chill. But yeah, I do practice before most shows.
Cool. I'd also love to talk about recording the cast album.
Sure.
What did that process look like? Did they record you all separately? Did they record some of you at the same time? What did that like logistically, and what did that look like?
Well, it was really fun. It was awesome. We were at the power station, which was then Avatar, which is, like the last remaining, or one of the last remaining great live recording rooms in Manhattan. At Berklee College of Music has taken over the building now, and they've been renovating for the last however long. There's still sessions that are happening there. The A room is, this iconic recording studio, and it's big. And the whole band was recording over the 3 days that we were there. We were all in the room at the same time, and as per Alex, everything was unbelievably well organized and pre-produced. There was a set amount of time for each song, and like there was an A plan, a B plan, and like he had everything very very much worked out. But because the band is so good, we were all like really focused and there to play. We pretty much did 3 takes, not very really more than 3 takes of any given song, and there were very very few punches in the entire process. Basically, they had whole takes to choose from pretty much most of the time, and Bill Sherman, he'd be listening in the control room, and he would give his feedback to Alex, whether or not he liked this take, that take, whether he thought it was worth doing another one, whether he thought we had the magic take. But yeah, we just played down the show. We just went through everything as we were supposed to go through it, and it was a pretty seamless process, but really fun, really really fun. Like there was a bunch of folks sort of that were sort of floating through. Questlove came through to listen for a bit, which was great. Lynn was there for most of it. It was definitely a precious situation, but everybody absolutely rose to the occasion. It's like I said, it's a killing band, and everybody came to play.
Man, I would take a live performance over a recording session any day. um, I like, recording session, time is money and they want perfection. And I think recording sessions I think there's so much more pressure involved. What are your thoughts? Do you like doing recording sessions? Do you like being in the studio?
I love it. I love it almost kind of more than anything else. It's like
Huh.
really one of my favorite things to do. Yeah, I love it. And yeah, that whole thing that you're talking about, that it's real. It's and it's taken years and years and years of just doing many many sessions to gain some sort of level of comfort and not feeling the pressure. You know what I mean? Like sort of yes, pressure. The pressure exists, but when the red light switches on, you gotta find a way to bring your game, to bring your A game. The process of discovering how to do that is no joke. But it's actually not dissimilar at all to learning how to play a show like Hamilton. It's like you got to go through the process of learning. Well, I tried that last night and that didn't work clearly, so tonight I'm going to try this. Let's see how that goes. It's all a process. It's a learning process. In this day and age, we don't have the same thing that like all of the classic session guys had in New York in the 70s and the 80s and even 90s, you know, where they were doing a gazillion sessions a week. They were in there so often. I mean, I think about that a lot. Like their comfort level when recording has just got to be incredible. You know, I think about someone like Will Lee, you know, who's just a master of that environment. It's a fascinating process. You know, it's all the inner game of like, you know, how do you perform well under pressure?
Mhm. Is your mindset pretty similar when you're in a live setting versus a recording studio? Is there any difference in your mindset?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, not really, but there's a difference in your physical environment. When I'm playing a live show, you know, there's an audience and a bunch of people all with a bunch of energy, and like, you know, you're on stage with your guys, and you know, the audience is out there, and it's sort of it takes on a whole other dimension because you're reacting in real time to what's going on in the room, whereas that's not in existence when you're in the studio. You're in a much more hermetically sealed environment with several other people. The goal is to create something on the spot, and there's less external environmental stuff going on. It's not a particularly good answer, I know, but that's how I see it.
Yeah. You work with a lot of people, yourself included, who are very successful. Who I would, Lin Manuel Miranda, Alex Lacamoire, who have just made such a positive impact
Mm.
on the theater scene. Are there any common characteristics that people of that high of caliber have when they're working?
Yeah, well, you know, that's a whole thing, man. Like that was actually one of the real gifts of getting to do this show was to get to observe a group of people that are at the absolute pinnacle of their game on the planet. You know, like they're
Hmm.
doing things at the absolute highest level, and it was pretty phenomenal. Alex, to my mind, is someone who epitomizes somebody that has worked. Basically, he's been in music since he was very young, and you know he's just done the work, man. He's been a great musician. It's all he's done since he was a young kid, and just done nothing but good work right throughout. And it's just kind of carried him from success to greater success. And it's all absolutely, you know, it's well earned, it's well deserved. You know, he's somebody that I see as like that has been an absolutely consistent musician all his life. And I would imagine that you know, I don't really know too much about everybody else's trajectory, Lynn, Tommy, any of those guys. I can't see it being too much different. You know, like they're all folks that have just worked incredibly hard, made the absolute most of who they are and what their talents are, and you know, it's just what you see is the fruits of their labor. And in terms of pretty much everybody in the production, all the musicians, that's for sure. You know, everybody is super professional. Everybody is really really good at their instruments. They're amazingly proficient musicians, and everybody is really nice. All really good folks. All of the basics.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that people are nice. I think sometimes you just hear like horror stories of people, at the Broadway level just being
Yeah,
absolute jerks.
yeah, yeah. No, I've definitely heard those stories. Fortunately, I have never seen that up close myself. You know, the Spider-Man band was also awesome. You know, we just had such a good time doing that show. And the two pit cultures are very, very different. Like the Spider Man thing was a lot looser and a lot more relaxed. Hamilton, we're all very much down to business once we get rocking there. Yeah, no, everybody's great. You know, I love each and every one of my bandmates, which again, super grateful for. A lot to be grateful for.
Hmm. I think it's easy to look at someone like Lin Manuel Miranda, who, in the Heights and Hamilton, but we don't always see. Hamilton took him like what 6 years to write. Like we don't
Yeah, yeah,
always
yeah, yeah.
see the work that goes in behind
Oh
really,
yeah.
really successful
Oh
people.
my God. Like I say, I don't know Lin well at all. I was incredibly fortunate to be around the guy and get to see him do his thing and like hear him while we every night while we were playing. But that would be my thought that any one of those the folks that put this together, they it's none of it's they all are incredibly talented people, but like the work ethic
Hmm.
is just also unbelievable, unbelievable, and something to aspire to. Like that is kind of what I've been not particularly coherently trying to describe is that like I hold that group of creatives like in the most the highest esteem. It was such an inspiring and amazing thing to see everybody collectively work on this, bring it together, and make it happen. And again, like because they'd done so much preparation and because they were so together on this, like it was when I showed up, it was already like 99.9% what you see at the Rogers now. It was so dialed in. It was completely and utterly dialed in. Spider-Man, completely different story. Nothing was dialed in by the time we started that thing. That was a whole other set of entanglements. Everybody that has been involved in Hamilton on the like the actors as well, they're all super inspiring people. Every cast that we've had has been unbelievable. The first cast was just absolutely magical, and just getting to hear those guys perform every night was absolutely spectacular.
Yeah. This has been so fun. So I like to ask everyone the same final question, which is advice to young people. So what advice would you give to young musicians who are just starting out, who want to be on Broadway? What advice would you give them?
Learn as much music as you can. Check out many different styles. That's what seems to be currency. If you're lucky enough to get a chair, then people are hiring you because you provide you do a specific thing that is representative of whatever the style of the music that show is about. And at this point in Broadway, that can mean anything. Like there's like it's so broad stylistically. If you're looking to sub on Broadway, that means that you have to ideally have some serious musical experience and be able to speak several different languages convincingly. And yeah, so check out as much music as possible, play as much music as possible, and outside of Broadway. That's also something that I think is currency. It's really important to have all the skills that are unique to the Broadway thing. Being able to play with a conductor, like understanding all of the things that go into being a good Broadway musician, but also, you want to be bringing as much musicianship to the table as you can bring. And it's hard to get musicianship without real world experience. So, yeah, look at as much music as you can possibly look at, listen to as much music as you can listen to, play as much music as you can play with a diverse group of folks. Be as broad and as deep as you can possibly be, and be a good person. Kind of like tagging that on at the end, but that's absolute key. Somebody that's easy to get along with, fun to be in the room with, and ticks all the boxes musically, and is professional and reliable.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this. And thank you for your work on that show. I know for me and for a lot of other people, that show has been really inspiring, especially during this season when we don't get to play theater. Just the band, you guys sound so great. So thank you for your dedication to that and your artistry that you bring to that show, because it's inspired a lot of people. So thank you.
Ah, that's so nice to say of you to say. I really appreciate that. Yeah, well, incredibly lucky and incredibly grateful to be doing a show like Hamilton. It's an amazing, amazing thing to be a part of.
The music for the Backstage Creative was improvised and performed by Ian Leroy, and the logo was designed by Zach Rimbold.